Hello everybody, Revan Magus here, welcoming you. Today we will be going over the differences between Stardew Valley and Rune Factory. Basically, what are their key differences? What makes them unique? Why are they different? How are they different? Should you be playing one over the other? What game kind of is suited more to your personality and will you like? So, if you enjoyed the video, definitely leave a like and leave a comment. But without further ado, let us jump in to the video. So the biggest differences that showcase between Stardew Valley and Rune Factory series is obviously the combat. Now, not knocking Stardew Valley's combat stylized, you basically have a limited variety of weapons that you can use. I believe for the most part it is short, like dagger-like weapons and your kind of basic long swords. So you have either a piercing or a sweeping motion with the sword in Stardew Valley. And it kind of feels a little bit like an afterthought in Stardew Valley in the sense that while the mines are there and you have like the desert, that isn't the main focus of your experience in Stardew Valley. It is very structured around the farming. Conversely, with the Rune Factory series, the big thing is that there is combat and you have a lot more dungeons to go with. There is a variety of weapons, and actually using the different weapons in Rune Factory kind of entails how you will level up, how you'll gain experience. So you are almost kind of tweaked into this, hey, try every different type of weapon out. For instance, using daggers or two-handed swords would give you a separate experience system and have different levels compared to like a spear or a hammer. The other big thing is the fact that there are the dungeons with a variety of enemies, bosses that you will encounter within each of these. So in Rune Factory, while there is the farming element, it definitely does have a bigger focus on the combat section, and a lot of that in the Rune Factory series, that is what is played into with the combat, is that you will actually advance the story along by leveling up. And that is probably the biggest key difference with Rune Factory and Stardew Valley, is this whole section of how the story does progress. It's just two different styles of narrative. Alright, so next up we have the story. I'm going to kind of focus on the overall story of Rune Factory, just kind of how it overall goes. Because there is so many different Rune Factories, there isn't that, hey, central theme going on in the sense of, in 3, you were an amnesiac who was also part monster. No, 3 was you were part monster, also amnesiac a little bit. 4 is you're an amnesiac who falls off of an airship, so there's kind of definitely a different tale to be told in each one. They're kind of own separate experiences. And with Stardew Valley only having one entry in entirely, it's a completely different story and a different take. There isn't that long multi-generational series going on. So first off, with Stardew Valley, the story is basically you are just tired of your city life, your corporate humduggery, and you want to make a change. And your grandfather bequeathed a farm to you that you can basically go back to nature. Very similar to the Harvest Moon Back to Nature series idea. Now, while this is all well and good, like I have said, the story focuses on that. It's just a story of having a life and basically kind of normal ways. You meet women or men if you're playing girl, guy, anything in between, and that is the story. You're just basically trying to, after a few years, showcase that you can raise a farm and make this life for yourself. Conversely, like I have said, in Rune Factory, the entire thing is kind of more focused on combat. Usually there is more of a storyline going on of something occurring that needs you to resolve it through violence. And for like I believe in that one, there's more of the bosses that were previous entities that helped out the dragon of the city. And there's a lot of story going on with that, and it's longer. There's no real sense of like a timetable that you have to, after so many years, do something. It's more driven on the essence of progressing through these different bosses. And as such, this story narrative, your farming does take a little bit more of a back seat, because with the story element of Stardew Valley, you're always farming, you're always getting stuff to progressively build up your empire almost. You're always progressively building up your city, your town, your farm. You're basically just always trying to progress by getting more stuff and being able to unlock new tiers of being able to like make a wine or cheese making. Whereas with Rune Factory, your farming and those kinds of elements are more of a means to an end. While you will level up your farm, while you will like build more into your house and such, a lot of it does come down to basically you are using the abilities you learn from farming, the items you unlock, that kind of stuff, to craft stronger weapons, stronger items, stronger armor for your character. There isn't really the sense of farming being necessity to keep like building up your actual farm. It's more to make yourself stronger. So Stardew Valley is more, you are externally trying to shape the world through the community center and such, whereas Rune Factory is more like internally focused on the sense that you are upgrading your own self to be able to overcome obstacles. Sound for me in both of these games, I this is always something I struggle with when I'm actually doing any sort of review, because for the most part, I actually don't really notice too much of these sounds unless it really does showcase to me that it is a really good melody or there is a lot of catchiness to it. A lot of the songs in Stardew Valley I don't actually really remember. Like there's no specific song that I can actually pick out. There's nothing that makes me kind of go like, man, I wish I had the CD, OST, that kind of stuff for it. I mean, there's games such as Castlevania that I remember some of the music from. There's games such as Mega Man that you remember some of the music from. But Stardew Valley, I don't really ever have that. Now, same with Rune Factory. Honestly, most of the time I don't actually remember any of the music from these games. The sound effects, I do remember a little bit from Rune Factory being a little bit more muted. Everything, a lot of these games is very standard, trivial fantasy fare music-wise. And sound effects-wise, like enemies do like a when they're hit, swishing noises when a sword is swung. There's just really not a lot that captures. It's a means to an end. And that's kind of how I feel with the sound in both of these games, to be honest. Characters. So, while I won't focus on a specific Rune Factory game with its characters, I will overall speak about the game's characters as a general archetype of how they function. Stardew Valley, once again, with the exception of 3-ish notable characters, the wizard, Krobus, and it's not a gnome. He might be a gnome. I don't really remember. The dwarf, I think, actually is what he is. There's 3 main characters that have a very mythological feel to them, but for the most part, a lot of the characters in Stardew Valley are very grounded. They're very realistic. Like Penny's not throwing out magic. Abigail's not doing anything like turning into a dragon. It's just very standard fare. And all of them kind of have these very realistic personalities. Now, Rune Factory goes more into the leaning of a fantasy element style, and it obviously shows. So, whereas you do have that in Stardew Valley where it's grounded, a lot of the characters in Rune Factory games tend to follow this more exaggerated style and more exaggerated personalities. You kind of have a character that might be more zany, more silly, more in your face, like over the top, like with their antics. And you do have that fantasy element of the fact that there is magic. And so, like, you do have characters, and especially since they will actually, in 3 and 4 at least, and 5 coming up, they will join you if you go out to fight. Some of them do have elements of magic, they can use magic. So, there is that element to it. They have to be more out of the ordinary. One of the ones I can easily think about that is definitely out of the ordinary is in 4, there is a girl that has a friend that is a ghost that continuously follows her around, and she's got like this marionette look to her in a way. The girl, not the ghost. And they try to explain it, but she's very like out there because of this whole element of a fantasy trope with it. So the characters kind of fall into this very different. You have realism versus fantasy elements, and that's pretty much the key difference. Now you may be asking yourself overall, which game do I think is better? I'm sure that is partially one of the reasons you were watching this video, is going, oh, which one is he going to actually pick? And to be honest, I like them both. I do think that I tend to lean more actually towards Rune Factory. The reason I do is just because there is more of a structured storyline, and for me that really does make it something I enjoy. Whereas Stardew Valley, it is so open to whatever you want to do that I tend to have a hard time figuring out what I want to do. Rune Factory kind of has this almost focused narrative with some side diversions of the farming, so it does make it a little bit more structured in my mind, because I know, oh, you're farming to raise up your stats. And that definitely helps keep me kind of more of a focused person. So I think if I had to say which one I did enjoy more, it probably would be the Rune Factory series, just because of that key element for me. And honestly, I do love some of the weird character designs that come up with these Rune Factory games. So that's kind of the two main things that like win it over for me. But you can't go wrong with either one of them. They're both great games. And I hope you guys enjoyed this look into what the difference is between Stardew Valley and Rune Factory. If you liked the video, definitely leave a like, leave a comment, leave a subscribe. Until next time, this is Revan Magus saying I'll catch you later.